we have to continuously focus on what is also going to work for the supplier. And so,
Right.
Jamie, I don't know if that's what you're hearing in the UK too, that suppliers are hesitant, or is there a lot of angst about pursuing cards because of that?
I think it's a mix of both. I think there's a bit of education. I think there's, both from the businesses who could use cards for payments, and also the suppliers. That if there's a charge somewhere, who's paying it? Is it the supplier? Right. Is it the customer effectively? So I think there's a bit of education, and if you like, let's turn this on its head. Let's be controversial. This is a good time to be controversial. Why wouldn't businesses use cards to make those small dollar payments or small GB payments? I mean, the reality comes down to, I assume, there's some element of risk to making a payment by a card. So there's a set of rules. There's a transactional risk, that you've got to control the transactions. And then there's also the legislation part, I'd imagine, where you've got to get the right documents from the countries you pay. But, Lynn, Mary, what's your thoughts? I mean, again, I'm sitting here listening to Lynn, thinking, makes sense for businesses to try and do away with these small value dollar.
So you know what I hear? I would say in the US, about 80% of the companies take credit cards, of some sort. And it's been that way for a while, and the number doesn't seem to be increasing. And when you talk to people, you hear things like, well, our CFO is afraid that people would use the card for personal purchases. They figure think it'd have fraud. And I'm thinking to myself when I hear this, why are you hiring people who you don't trust? Okay. At the end, I mean, I don't say that because it's a tacky thing to say, but I really want to yell at people. Why, and I think it's a misplaced fear. Yeah, somebody's going to use it incorrectly, but it's going to be few and far between. Lynn, I'm going to stop ranting and raving and let you talk about it.
Well, okay, there are a few things here. So, the fraud element, you have to, again, I don't want to speak to every individual contract because I can't. But generally speaking, there are protections for the buying organization, whereby one, if it's external fraud and a cardholder looks at their statement and they see something, they have no idea what it is and whatnot.
I didn't buy that.
Exactly. So you can, obviously report that and get your money back and not be liable, just, like we are as consumers by and large. And when it comes to that internal element of potential cardholders making a personal purchase, well, that too, there are usually some protections in place or things offered by the card issuers that can protect the organizations from those employees that, according to Mary, you shouldn't have hired anyway if you didn't trust them. But,
right.
So there are protections there, and even when we were talking earlier about the duplicates, again, if you find that, you have paid a supplier via, say, a P card, as well as through a AP method, non-card method, you can, go back and dispute that card transaction, dispute that duplicate, and hopefully then, get your money back. So there are so many protections, at that level. But I do think, from my understanding, beyond the US, beyond North America, there are maybe some steps that European, UK organizations could be taking to further improve the foundational elements of a P card program. That it's like kind of really stepping back and saying, do we have all the different controls in place? Do we have clear policies and procedures? Have we identified the roles, the responsibilities? Are we willing to hold people accountable? Do we have an auditing element, that can help catch anything perhaps that is not correct? And there are so many different factors that go into just a strong card program. If you build it correctly, and you can make adjustments even after, you've really gotten going with cards. But if you build it correctly, I mean, you shouldn't have the tons of problems that some organizations envision. So there's
it's more imaginary than actual? Like, do they fear something that's worse than actually would happen?
Well, and that comes into it too, because if you read industry articles out there, at least in the US, there are so many articles about P card fraud. And by and large, they are saying it's coming from public sector organizations, like at a government or higher education institution. And that's not because they're worse than the private sector, but they're the ones that land in the news because of their
Right.
public sector status.
And freedom of information. We have something called Freedom of Information Act over here. Right.
And
I
so,
agree with you.
Yeah, it does play with controllers' minds or CFOs' minds. And you just still, again, if you go through and have a well-built program with internal controls, you're far minimizing the risk. But I will say, and I don't even know, Jamie, if you want to go here, but one of the biggest challenge, at least over in the UK or in Europe in general, is the VAT challenges.
Oh.
And I don't want to talk about that. I'm not.
So
I don't feel qualified. But it's
let's
a
throw
hurdle.
it back. Let's throw it back to him.
Okay. But you asked why wouldn't they use P cards? That's a challenge they have to overcome. So.
But I think Lynn, you're right, absolutely. I mean, in the UK, tax, VAT, that is, I consider it as a challenge, but it's one that can be overcome. And I think that organizations that just don't do things because of a challenge, obviously are the right type of organization. So yes, VAT in the UK, although it's not very complex, it's not like in the States where you have masses of legislation and masses of tax issues. We have one standard usually, but it is a blocker. But if we turn this on its head again, so this is part of Accounts Payable Appreciation Week. So thank you everybody for tuning in live, and thank you for the people watching this on replay. Again, look, the whole thing this week is about celebrating accounts payable, procure to pay folk. Lynn, you wrote a blog that both myself and Mary have commented on. You're constantly promoting best practice, and so is Mary, clearly. The blog itself is about how AP folk can really help themselves. What's the best practice? So I'm going to open the floor to the two experts. How can AP get involved in making payments more effective? What parts of the process can get involved? Because this is all about collaboration. So open the floor to both, please.
Well, so Mary, Lynn, do you want to go ahead? He effectively steered the conversation.
So what I like to tell people, I'm just going to talk a little, and then I'm going to throw it back to you. So I don't think you're getting off the hook. So what we like to tell people, and I think this is true regardless of what country you're in, take a look at your payments. How many payments do you have? How are you making them? For us, how many are checks? How many are cards? How many are ACH? How many are wire transfer? And then you get it, where you are. And then you not only want to look at how many, but what is the dollar amount? And, our big push here now is those portion of payments that are paper checks that are under $100, $250, or $500, just to get them onto cards, which is where I think they belong. And so, for the European audience, just think pounds, euros, whatever your own currency is. We have the same 80-20 rule. It might even be, even worse than that. And then decide how you want them to go. Lynn, I know you've got a lot of suggestions on how to get how accounts payable specifically can get involved in the card process. And maybe this would be a good time, if you don't mind, to share that.
No, of course, it's a great topic. And Jamie, you were indicating that you have a live event coming up where you want to discuss accounts payable and procurement, working more closely together. And that's a huge part of this. I think AP can be leaders in initiating that relationship. I think historically AP doesn't get enough credit, or, besides the credit aspect, they're not given enough, opportunities to really shine. They're sort of pigeonholed into this area of make your payments, process invoices, and that's what you do. But I think even if not given an outright invitation or opportunity, that AP can step up to say, hey, I have done an analysis of our payments, as Mary just suggested, and I see that we've got this clear, separation between, what we consider low value or high value, and initiate a discussion around how can we make things more efficient. Because, on the other side of the table with procurement, I mean, sometimes they get stuck rubber stamping purchase, purchase requests, requisitions, making purchase orders for things they know nothing about, and they're just stamping things and moving them along. So it's about both sides realizing that they can add far more value to an organization if you can take care of some of the tail spend or most of the tail spend. But as Mary said, start at lower dollar amounts and just keep working your way up until you hit a point where you feel like you've got a good separation. But then if procurement is not rubber stamping things, they can be more strategic in selecting suppliers, getting contract terms, in place that address that whole purchase to pay process and how things will work and the timing and so forth. And accounts payable can work on, what are the metrics? How much are we spending? Are we meeting internal goals related to days payable outstanding or, kind of extending the float or the working capital? And both sides can just be doing more for an organization if both are not so caught up in addressing that low dollar spend. And so I think AP can just take the lead and say, let's do this and bring people together.